Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the September garden checklist video. I do one of these each month here in the garden in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B, where I just go over the things that I'm doing in my garden here. A couple years ago, I did a more detailed list. If you want to go back and take a look at those, I did kind of what anybody and everybody might do in the garden during the month of September and each of the months of that year. I've just kind of narrowed it down to what I have going on here in Raleigh. As we transition into September, it's still hot. It's still very hot here, especially in the southeast. And here in Zone 7B, we'll have nighttime temperatures above 65, right through most of September probably. Sometime toward the end of September, though, is the best time of year to be planting in the southeast. Any kind of hardy shrubs, perennials, anything that you know is hardy in your area, that's the best time of year to put it in the ground. I plant year round. And so if it's one plant like this maple, I'll dig a hole and stick it in the ground. It's, evidenced on the channel and in the videos that I'm putting up all summer long. But when somebody asks me what is the best time of year, fall is the best time because you can kind of dig a hole, plant it, water it in well, and then, you want to monitor the watering because fall can be a little dry here in the south unless we get a hurricane, which I'm not rooting for by any stretch of the imagination. But if we got, normally, our rain is a little lower, but when the nighttime temperatures are cooler and the plants are slowing down and the days are shortening, the plants are actually using less. So regardless of rainfall, they require less watering, and so it's just less stress on the plants overall. Now, I don't plant things that are marginal here. So if I was pushing the boundaries of a palm, or I was pushing the boundaries of of whatever tropical plant that I was trying to put in this garden, those are things I'm going to spring plant. I want to get a whole season underneath them before they experience their first winter. I also don't typically plant grasses, ornamental grasses that go dormant in the wintertime. I'll plant the evergreen like carex and things like that, but most of my ornamental grasses that go dormant, I find that especially in our clay-based soil here in the area that I'm in, grasses can really struggle and get root rot issues during the wintertime. During the fall months, I will transition my summer annuals over to pansies and snapdragons and dianthus in some places, not everywhere, but there'll be some plantings of those things. I typically wait until the soil temperature falls down below 65 degrees or so. I got a little small soil thermometer, works great for that. Makes quick work of figuring out when it's time to put the pansies in. Typically for me, that's around the middle of October, but I might buy some before then and update some of the containers because I can plug them in, around the edges of some of these containers as some of the things start to fade, like this vinca that doesn't look the best now. May go ahead and plug a couple pansies in there at some point. The other annuals that are the other impatiens that are, in the ground in front of it, and other annuals along the bed edges, they'll continue to look great here until we get a frost, which is usually, again, around the middle of October or so. As the days get shorter, the nights get cooler, they won't respond as much to pruning. And so during the summer months, we'll prune these annuals, every 4 weeks or so in some sort of rotation where we're not pruning them all down at one time, so we're leaving them for the bees. But at this point, we'll leave them be because any kind of pruning we do on them, they won't respond very quickly with shorter days and cooler nights. There are fall blooming perennials. Asters would be in that group. Anemones would be in that group. There are hardy chrysanthemums or perennial chrysanthemums, not the little round balls that you buy off the table at the box stores and at garden centers in the fall. Those have been bred to really look like that in those containers for the fall, but not really be great perennials. That doesn't mean they won't come back. They're not going to look like that little round ball without a lot of work next season, but there are very hardy, very easy to grow perennial chrysanthemums. They're probably available at the box stores and whatever garden center you use at this point, or maybe mail order. And I enjoy adding those things to the garden because as my other perennials, coneflowers and black-eyed Susans and bee balm and whatever it is are all ending, those things are just starting to bloom in the landscape. I'm also, again, not just updating containers potentially with pansies or snapdragons. You can also do things as simple as coleus, which will die when we get a hard freeze, but if I could find them inexpensively, adding something like this to a container, looks as good as anything else does in the fall. Super, super colorful fall colors. One other thing is I just put up a video about ordering my bulbs for this year. You may want to go ahead and order your flowering bulbs if you're going to have them. Some of the companies will cold treat them for you if you need them to be cold treated. This year I went with a very different bulb order, and I'm not getting any that need to be cold treated. I'm only getting bulbs that I can naturalize in this landscape that will come back every year. Just changing that thing up. But if you are ordering tulips and you're in the South, they need to be cold treated. So you either need to get them sooner the better, so you can get them in your own refrigerator, or have the company that you're buying them from get them cold treated before they send them out to you. A couple other things on plant shopping right now. This is probably going to be the best selection of fall plants that the garden center is going to have, especially here in the South. So if you're looking, for interesting trees, potentially fruit plants, shrubs, whatever it is, this is probably going to be the best selection for that fall planting season. Also, fall blooming plants like potentially camellias or caryopteris. Those would be available right now as well at the garden centers. On your perennials, it's going to be super tempting in the fall to start to cut them down when they start to look weak. This Agastache looks great, but my black-eyed Susans over here look pretty rough. But I don't cut them down. I let the energy get pulled back down into the roots and let them go dormant naturally. I'm also going to collect some seed on these Prairie Sun Rudbeckia, and so in order to do that, I need to let those seed heads mature completely. And so then I'll be fighting the birds. The birds will take some, and I will collect some as well. And going back to talking about pruning the annuals back, I said that the nighttime temperatures get too cool for them to respond and come back. It would also prevent them from setting seed going forward. And so I want to collect some seed from these flowering things throughout the landscape. So again, just not going to prune on them. The birds will get some seed, I'll get some seed, and everything will just kind of go to sleep naturally. And then after I get the seed off the annuals, they'll get pulled out. There's a lot of tropical and kind of subtropical bulbs and corms that some folks dig up in the fall to save through the winter. Dahlia is a great example of that. Here in Zone 7B, I just leave them in the ground. They were all spring planted. Some portion of my dahlias are going to come back and some aren't, and I do some new ones from seed every year. So the ones that don't come back are kind of opportunity for something new. But those of you north of me, if you want to save your dahlias, they do need to be dug and stored. And that's going to be the case with caladiums, elephant ears. I leave my elephant ears in the ground. Again, I'm in Zone 7B. I've got a couple out front out here that have been in the ground for long enough that they should reliably come back unless we have a crazy winter. But there are some of those things that need to be lifted. You can find videos on YouTube for how to store your dahlias through the winter. There's some of those just kind of marginal things like elephant ears that I can just push right up to the last minute to make that decision about whether I was going to take them out of the ground or not, up to a frost. Then there are other things that are just truly tropical. This Diplodenia, which is mandevilla-like, but more of a shrub form of a mandevilla. This is truly tropical for me. It's a Zone 10 perennial. So this thing's got to come in, and I can't wait until like the first frost for that to happen. So sometime in late September, if I want to save something like this, it needs to come on in the house and not be exposed to even a single frost. And of course, that's the case with the houseplants too. I've got the whole back porch full of houseplants. Decisions on those will be made here in the first 2 or 3 weeks of September in terms of some things need to be up potted, some things need to be, I actually got a few things that probably just need to go away. Honestly, at this point, we've got so many houseplants, and so there'll be a little pot switcheroo before those things go in. And in pulling them out of the containers, if I pull this out of the container, I might find some things in it that I didn't want to bring in the house in the first place. So that's part of that pot switcheroo thing. So sometime in September or into October, the annuals that are in this perennial and annual border, there are lots of perennials that are back here as well. That first year planted, so they're kind of overwhelmed by the annuals this year, but next year they'll be bigger, better, fuller, and there'll be a few less annuals planted in this border. As these things come out, we don't really let things leave the property. This is great organic material, so a lot of this will go in the compost pile. Some of it, if it's just small handfuls here or there, we're going to mulch right after this, and so it'll just get pulled up and lay right in place, and mulch will go right over top of it. Those decisions will be made just as we go. The vast majority of it, though, will get piled up in the compost pile and end up on our vegetable garden at some point. The other decision in that is it diseased? Does it have insect issues? Those kinds of things. Those aren't going to go in the compost pile. Those are things that may in fact leave the property, or go in a little burn pile or something like that if you had a burn pile. But those are, you know, things like big leaf hydrangeas. Typically when the leaves fall off of them in the fall, I want to clean those leaves out from under them so those disease issues aren't splashing back up on the plant. And again, that's true with pretty much anything I'm taking out. If it looks healthy when it's coming out or was healthy all season, then it becomes part of the garden going forward. The next thing that'll happen is back here, these annuals have laid out here on the zoysia grass. And so when they come out in the next few weeks, I will re-edge. So I'll reestablish this edge. I've been letting this come out here on the grass, and I actually just take the mower and mow right up into here, just like this. And I kind of like it laying over on the edge. A lot of people like just a perfect little trench edge, and that's what I'll have through the winter. But this time of year, I kind of like it. They're kind of overlapping one another. But again, they'll come out. I'll trench edge this, and then this is going to be mulched for the fall. I like to mulch. I really like to mulch twice a year, and I don't use a whole lot of mulch when I mulch. I'm not mulching 4 or 5 inches deep. I'm just mulching a couple inches, getting the ground covered. By getting the ground covered that time of year in the fall, I'm going to reduce a lot of those late winter, early spring flowering weeds like henbit and chickweed that can just absolutely take over a garden. So I'm putting a cap on the soil at the right time of year to stop those winter, those weeds that germinate in the late fall and then just sit there and wait for the soil to warm up a little bit in the late winter and to just take over your garden. And then sometime in the early spring, I do the same thing again. I'm using the same amount of mulch as everybody else. I'm just splitting it into 2 applications. Of course, that mulch is going to also help hold in moisture through what can be, again, a pretty dry fall. When I'm watering in the fall, just like any other time of year, I put my finger down a couple inches into the ground. If it's dry, I drown it. I mean, really, really saturate the area very, very thoroughly, and then back off and don't water. And if you've got fresh mulch or the ground covered well, again, shorter days, cooler nights, you're not going to have to water very often. Let's talk about a few things I don't want to do this time of year. I'm not going to do any general pruning. General pruning of plants, just reforming them, reshaping them, can in some instances get new growth and encourage new growth, and that new growth can be damaged by a frost. Same thing with fertilizer. I don't want to be fertilizing this time of year because I don't want to push things. The only thing I'll be fertilizing is when I put the pansies and snapdragons and some of those winter blooming things in. There'll be some fertilizer added to that. Also, I'm in the process of putting the fall vegetable garden in. You'll see in just a second. Again, that's had a bit of fertilizer added to it. And third on the things to be avoiding is transplanting. I think it's a little too early in the year to be transplanting. Again, it can be pretty dry this time of year. And so I'll wait until it's cooler to do some transplanting. And I'll do transplanting of perennials as they're going dormant. So I'll mark some of those so I don't forget where they are as they've gone dormant. I'll move shrubs, I'll move trees, I'll move pretty much anything, but I like for them to kind of go dormant, soil moisture to come back up a bit. This is probably going to be more like late October or November, or waiting until the very end of winter, March, that time of year. I said no pruning this time of year, and another one of those reasons about no general pruning other than forcing new growth, which could be burned during an early freeze or frost, something like that. The other issues are some of the things like azaleas, big leaf hydrangeas. They've already set flower buds for next spring, and so if you do any general pruning on them, you're going to be pruning those off. Now, on the other hand, if you've just got one crazy limb on something, I've limbed this Indian hawthorn up into a tree. I got one limb here. I know it's going to come off in the future. I'll go ahead and take that thing off now. I don't want to be so strict on this pruning rule of not pruning that you don't prune. And, if you see a crazy limb on something, take that stuff off whenever you want to. No real strict rules on that. And so as I go around the garden, if there's something that needs to be, some crazy limb sticking off the side of something, that's coming off whatever day of the year it is. This is zoysia. It's a warm season grass. It'll actually go dormant once it gets cooler outside, and there's nothing really for me to do on it in the fall. Nothing at all. This has only been fertilized once this year. I fertilized it back in February. I did a lot of prep before this sod went down. It's got a few weeds in it that I actually need to get in here and hand pull, but this has only been fertilized once, and I've done no other maintenance on it. It does need to be mowed today. Those of you with cool season lawns like fescue or bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, it is that time of year when you'll be overseeding, fall fertilizing, lots of maintenance and work for you guys to do. But folks with warm season grass, just let it go dormant, and we'll address it when it starts waking up in the spring. Normally in the September video, I'd be talking all about the tomatoes I still have and peppers and other things, but we actually have already torn everything out. Our goal going forward with this vegetable garden area is it's been very industrial thus far. We're actually going to turn this into more of a designed area, maybe expand it into a little bit more of the sun that we have over here, so we can have the space blend into the garden a little bit better. We've taken down all the parts and pieces for the tomatoes and all the climbing vegetables. We weren't here for 4 or 5 weeks, so the vegetable garden was a bit out of control. If you still have vegetables in the ground, so if you still have, let's say you have pumpkins or any kind of melon, tomatoes, those kinds of things, as the days get shorter and the nights get cooler, they probably won't be able to go to flower to finished fruit. And so when I do have vegetables in the ground this time of year, I'll start taking those flowers off, and just that way the plant can put the energy into finishing the fruit that's actually on the plant and not trying to make more that it can't finish anyway. Do still have okra out here, and it's producing like crazy, and it will right through until we get a frost, honestly, in October. Okra is just extremely reliable for us in that way. But again, we got back home from some traveling. We tore out the cattle panels, tore out the vegetables, and then down here, we've planted peas, collards, carrots, beets, and other greens. That, let's see, what else has been planted out here? Can you think of anything off the top of your head, Steph? Kohlrabi. And then inside, we've started seed for all of the lettuce and other fall vegetables. So this will be completely planted out here in the next couple weeks. Video went up about a week and a half ago on starting those seeds in the house. They're all well up and germinated, as well as the seed that we were using for this year, what was going to be planted directly and what was going to be planted into trays in the house. But you guys will see this evolve over the next few weeks. And again, this is going to become more of a landscaped space, more of a finished space with a layout for the vegetables that make it look like, we're putting some thought into it, and it's not the jungle that we've allowed it to become a couple times. But again, it is time to be putting these fall vegetables in the ground. Before the first of the fall vegetable seeds went in, the summer things came out. It was raked smooth. Most of the weeds were removed, although I still see a few that have escaped removal that still need to come out. And then a fresh layer of compost went down. This isn't ever tilled over here. It was tilled the first time I ever did this space, planted in this space, but it's been extremely productive. We put down a little bit of compost in between each replanting. That's completely adequate. The other thing we do is in between rows or in spaces that aren't planted with either seeds or plants, we put down wood chips. And so these wood chips will be basically paths through here that will also compost during the season and become part of the plantings going forward. Got a lot of protecting to do. Rabbits will definitely come along with all these new seedlings up here and want to eat them pretty quickly. So we have a rabbit fence. It's actually a plastic deer fence, but it'll go up in a video. I'm gonna have a video about protecting things from rabbits. Look for that video coming out, but we're gonna put a deer fence around this space. It's actually folded over, so it's only about 3.5 feet tall. It'll go around this space to protect from rabbits. Then we have a shade protection cover that can go over the top of it that can protect from the cabbage moths, those little white butterflies looking moths that fly around this time of year. They will land on all of our brassicas. So our collards, our broccoli, cauliflower, any brassica that you have in the garden is susceptible to those cabbage moths. So we've got a cover for that until we see those moths going away. That's rabbit protection, moth protection, and then the third thing to protect from is cold. The way the cold typically works for us here is in October, about the 15th to the 25th in there, we'll get our first frost. And then we may not get another frost for 3 or 4 weeks. And so a simple frost protection blanket I can use 2 or 3 times during the fall to protect these cool season vegetables from any kind of hard freeze or heavy frost. And I can extend this season right up through December. If I just let them do their thing, one of these frosts will start to set some of the stuff back, slow them down, that kind of thing. So frost protection blanket. So there's definitely heavier projects that are best done in the fall, whether you're building fences or sidewalks or patios or any of those kinds of things, or putting a fountain in place. Anything that when it's is better than when it's 95 degrees outside and humid like it is here most of the summertime. And so those are the kind of projects I like to tackle in September, late September into October and November. Certainly a great time of year to do those kinds of projects. I definitely take care of the birds in the fall and throughout the winter, and so having water available for them, even having water available for the bees. I have so many native bees on all of these pollinator plants that you guys see in these videos. There's just bees everywhere out here. The bees are in the water as well, and so they take advantage of it just like the birds do. But we're also feeding the birds. The birds are an important part. I talked about that moth laying caterpillars over there on the brassicas. We had a really bad time with that 2 years ago, and fast forward to this past spring season, and the birds were taking them out every bit as fast as they could lay their lay their eggs over there. And so that was good to see. The birds can be very, very helpful in your garden. Those of you who are in colder areas may not be doing any planting in the fall, maybe shutting the garden down for the season, bringing your house plants in, digging up, all your tropicals and getting them all protected. Great planting time. It's a great planting time for everybody, really. I spend a lot of time out here, enjoying the pollinators, enjoying, what's going right, what's going wrong. I actually enjoy some of the plants being eaten by insects, which sounds kind of weird. Everybody else is out there trying to spray them and kill them, and I'm kind of interested in them. I'm kind of interested in what comes along and eats them. What I can attract to the garden, to take care of some of my problems. But we try to document everything. We document all the annuals that were planted this year, where they were planted. We document all the perennials before they go to sleep. Make sure that we're mapping everything so that we know where everything is year to year. We can put some plastic tags in place, or some flags in place, or some broken pencils, anything, whatever you got, if you're going to be moving something later that's going to go completely dormant. So those are things that we're doing as well in the garden. So lots of things to do, especially as it gets cooler. It's much, much nicer. It's definitely an advantage to living in the South, is that we can garden right through the winter, and it's actually a better time to be doing it for the most part anyway. So thank you guys for following along with these monthly checklist videos. I'll be back in October with another one.